He said I was his life. But when I fell apart, he just watched. And that's when I realized I was just a piece in his game. But then, I became the nightmare he could never escape. I was 19 when I met him. He walked into my world like sunlight after a storm, warm, steady, impossible to ignore. I was drowning back then, in grief, in loneliness, in the silence my parents left behind when they died in that car crash. My relatives passed me around like some unwanted burden, but he made me feel seen. Liam. That was his name. The boy with ocean eyes and a voice that made every lie sound like a vow. He found me in the university library, huddled behind a stack of psychology books, pretending to be strong. I remember how he smiled at me that day, like he already knew all my broken parts and had fallen in love with each one. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I wasn't. But somehow, I whispered, "Yeah." He didn't believe me, and yet, he didn't push. He just sat beside me, and stayed. Day after day, like clockwork. Coffee turned into conversation, and conversation turned into confessions. He listened to every scar in my story like it was a sacred secret. And when he finally said, "You're my life now. I'll protect your heart like it's my own," I believed him. God, I believed him. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Alive. He moved into my tiny apartment after just 3 months. I didn't even question it. He said he couldn't sleep without hearing my heartbeat next to his, and I thought that was love. He knew everything about me, my childhood fears, the way I counted my steps when I was anxious, the panic attacks that came like waves in the night. And with every secret I gave him, I felt lighter. But what I didn't realize was that every secret was a tool he was collecting, a blueprint to my destruction. At first, the changes were small. He'd roll his eyes when I cried, call me dramatic when I panicked, tell me I was too sensitive, too much, too broken. I started apologizing for existing. The man who once held my shaking hands during nightmares now sighed and turned away. The one who called me his world began to treat me like background noise. He stopped texting when he was out. He came home late, smelling like someone else's perfume. When I asked, he just laughed. "Paranoid again? You always do this. You're lucky I stay with you." And I believed that too. I thought I was the problem. He said he loved me, but I had to stop making it hard for him to love me. So I did everything I could. I cooked his favorite meals, dressed the way he liked, smiled even when my chest was cracking open. I tried to become easier to love. But the more I gave, the less he cared. Until one day, I found the texts. Dozens of them. Dozens of her. Her name was Emily. She called me the emotional wreck. He called her his escape. That night, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at my reflection in the mirror, wondering when I stopped being me. When did I become someone who begged for crumbs from the man who once swore he'd give me the world? And when I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He just shrugged. "I mean, what did you expect? You're broken. I got tired of fixing you." He walked away from me that night. Left me on the kitchen floor, surrounded by everything I ever gave him: love, loyalty, trust, scattered like broken glass. But what he didn't know was that the version of me he left behind? She didn't stay broken for long. The version of me he left behind? She cried for one last night. I sat on that cold kitchen floor until the sun rose, numb and empty, letting silence crawl over my skin like frost. But something shifted in me as the morning light crept through the blinds. Not hope. No, not yet. It was rage. A quiet, burning rage. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that sharpens. It coiled around my spine, held my chin up, and whispered, "No more. No more waiting for him to come back. No more justifying his cruelty. No more bleeding for someone who only came close to watch me drown." That day, I didn't message him. I didn't beg. Instead, I stood up, and I started planning. I stopped answering his calls. And when he knocked on my door 3 days later, pretending to care, pretending to check on me, I opened the door with a smile that scared even me. He looked surprised. "Wow, you look different," he said, eyes scanning me like I was a puzzle that had suddenly changed pieces. I tilted my head. "Better, right?" He grinned like he still had me wrapped around his finger. "I always liked when you wore your hair down." I didn't even flinch. "I didn't do it for you." That night, I let him think he still had access to me. Let him believe I was still weak, still soft, still reachable. But behind the smile, I was building a storm. He had always underestimated me, played games with my mind, twisted my fears into weapons. He thought I was fragile because I cried, because I loved too hard, because I shattered. But here's the thing about shattered people: once we collect our pieces, we learn how to cut. I started with her, Emily. No confrontation, no messy drama. I didn't need that. Instead, I became her friend. She didn't know me by name. She only knew the version of me I introduced online: sophisticated, kind, curious. A new connection through a mutual business circle I created from scratch just to get close. She had no idea who I really was. She confided in me, told me about this man she was seeing. A man who made her feel alive. A man who said he was trapped in a relationship with someone unstable. Someone who threatened to hurt herself if he ever left. I swallowed the bile in my throat and smiled through every message she sent. And then I gave her truth. Not rage. Not revenge. Evidence. Screenshots. Audio clips. Bank transfers. Lies layered on lies. I packaged it neatly and anonymously, dropped it into her inbox, and waited. 2 days later, Liam was knocking on her door. She didn't open it. Another 3 days, and his social media started to collapse, photos disappearing, tags removed, his carefully built image unraveling at the seams. I was just getting started. You see, Liam was always so proud of his job. His little consulting firm where he bragged about being a partner. He used my support, my savings, even my laptop to build that foundation. I still had access to everything: emails, documents, internal chats. So I pulled the string. There were shady deals, hidden accounts, employee complaints he never reported. I gathered it all. Every rotten root he thought no one would find. And I gave it to the right people. Not loudly. Not vindictively. Just quietly. Legally. By the time his firm got the audit notice, I had already vanished from his system. New phone. New job. New apartment. He tried reaching out. First through guilt. "Please. You're ruining my life. Why are you doing this?" Then through anger. "You psycho. You always were unstable. This is why I left." And finally, through desperation. "Okay. Please. Just talk to me. I'll do anything. I miss you." But I didn't reply. He had once watched me break without blinking. Now it was my turn. And I didn't even need to lift a hand. His own sins were the hammer. I just made sure they found the glass. Watching his life unravel from a distance should have felt satisfying. And in a way, it did. But not in the loud, victorious way people imagine. There was no cheering. No celebration. Just silence. The kind that comes after a storm when everything's been stripped bare. That silence was my freedom. He tried to rebuild. Of course he did. Liam had always been a survivor, in the most selfish sense of the word. When Emily left, he moved on to another girl 2 months later. Some young intern from his old office. I watched them from afar, like an old movie I'd seen before. The love bombing. The compliments. The way he mirrored her interests. It was always the same script, just a different actress. And I knew how it ended. She didn't see it yet, but I did. I could see how he chipped away at her, bit by bit. And that rage inside me, the quiet one, it surged again. Because men like Liam don't change. They just changed victims. So I made a decision. One final act. Not to save myself, I'd already done that. But to make sure he never got the chance to break someone else the way he broke me. This time, I didn't just want to ruin his image or his job. I wanted to ruin the story he told about himself. Liam had carefully crafted this persona, a charming entrepreneur with a tragic past, full of compassion and emotional depth. He leaned into the role of the misunderstood man, hurt by a toxic ex, always trying to do right. But behind the curtain, he was a manipulator, a puppeteer. And I had the strings now. I started gathering every girl he'd ever dated. It took time, finesse. But pain connects people in ways most will never understand. One by one, I found them. Claire, Ava, Jenna. Even one from his hometown who said he used to trap girls in emotional loyalty tests back in high school just to see how far they'd go for him. They all thought they were alone, that they were the crazy ones, that maybe they had ruined something beautiful. But when they saw each other, it was like waking from a collective nightmare. We formed a quiet alliance. Not to scream, not to post, not to go public with fury. That would have been too easy for him to dismiss. We decided to dismantle him, methodically, piece by piece. We sent reports to his new employer, under aliases, with details and proof of past misconduct. We submitted anonymous reviews to his clients, exposing his unethical practices. We let the truth ripple through every surface of his shiny little world. And then, we went silent again. No replies. No threats. Just the sound of consequences doing what they do best. He started losing clients. Then he lost his job. Then his new girlfriend, who we never even contacted, left him without explanation. And for the first time since I'd known him, he was alone. Truly alone. I passed him once on the street. He didn't see me. He looked hollow, like a man searching for someone to blame in a room full of mirrors. He lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. The same fingers that once traced my jaw like I was glass he could mold. Now they trembled. Weak, ashen. I didn't feel pity. Not even satisfaction. Just peace. He had built his kingdom out of our pain. And when we took it back, brick by brick, he was left standing in ruins, surrounded by ghosts who no longer wept. I walked past him that day, head high, heart steady. And as I turned the corner, I smiled. Because I knew the truth. He didn't just lose his job. He didn't just lose his lovers. He lost control. And for a man like Liam, that was the one thing he could never live without. I thought that would be the end of it. That once he was stripped of his lies, his titles, and the illusion of power, he'd fade into the nothing he always deserved. But people like Liam don't disappear quietly. They scramble. They plot. And when they've lost everything else, they look for the last thing they think they can still control. You. It started subtly. A burner number messaging me late at night. Still thinking about you. You'll never be free of me. You're just as twisted as me. You just hide it better. I blocked the number. He made another. Then came the emails. Then the fake profiles viewing all my accounts. He even tried contacting one of the women from our group, pretending to be a changed man, begging for another chance. Spouting therapy jargon, talking about growth, accountability, healing. We didn't buy it. Not for a second. Because we'd already learned. Liam didn't want to change. He just wanted the consequences to stop. Still, I won't lie, part of me was afraid. Not of him hurting me physically. No, he didn't need fists. He was too good with words, too practiced with lies. I was afraid he'd find a new mask. One believable enough that others would fall for it again. That he'd go on breaking people behind closed doors while the world clapped for his recovery. So, I took one final step. I went public. Not with my name. Not with his either. But with our story. I started a blog under a pseudonym. Anonymous, raw, and terrifyingly honest. I poured everything into it: the manipulation, the gaslighting, the slow unraveling of my sanity, the way he twisted my kindness into a weapon. It went viral in weeks. Messages began pouring in, not just from women, but from men too. People who'd loved someone like Liam. People who'd been left questioning their own worth, wondering if they were too broken, too dramatic, too much. And as they read my story, they began to write their own. Pain became a chorus. And slowly, healing began to echo back. It shook me to realize I wasn't just destroying Liam anymore. I was taking away the shadows he once thrived in. He tried to sue. Of course he did. Sent some vague legal threat through a mutual contact. Said he knew it was me and that he'd make me pay. But he never followed through. Because deep down, Liam was always a coward. He didn't fear justice. He feared exposure. And now, everyone could see through him, even if they didn't know his name. He tried to date again. Word got around. He tried to start another business. No investors bit. He was radioactive, untouchable. Not because we screamed, but because we whispered loud enough that no one could ignore it anymore. And me? I started sleeping again. Really sleeping. I went back to school. I made real friends, the kind who didn't demand pieces of me to feel whole. I learned to take up space again. I stopped apologizing for surviving. Some nights, the memories still knock on the walls of my mind. His voice. His smile. The way he'd tilt his head and make me believe I was safe. But now I know better. He never loved me. He loved what he could take from me. And when I stopped giving, he stopped pretending. But what you'll never understand is that while he was busy trying to break me, he was also forging me into something stronger. Unshakable. Untouchable. Unforgiving. Sometimes, I wonder if he ever truly realizes what he lost. Not just me, but the version of himself he believed he could always return to through me. I wasn't just his lover. I was his sanctuary. The place he ran when the world stopped applauding him. When the mask slipped. When the mirror cracked. He used to whisper to me, "You're the only person who really sees me." And he was right. I did see him. I saw the little boy who never learned love without conditions. The man who wore charm like armor. The predator who smiled when he wounded because it made him feel powerful. And I stayed. I stayed longer than I should have. Gave more than I had. Forgave more than he deserved. But not anymore. The girl who cried for him on the kitchen floor? She doesn't exist now. The woman I am today would look her in the eye and whisper, "Let him go. You're not losing him. You're escaping him." And escape, I did. But sometimes, escaping isn't enough. Sometimes, you need to haunt what once hunted you. A few weeks ago, I got an email. From an address I didn't recognize. No subject. No greeting. Just a short message. "I still don't understand how you turned everything against me." I stared at the screen, heart quiet. Steady. And then I replied, for the first time in months. Just one line. "I didn't turn anything against you, Liam. I simply stepped aside and let your truth catch up." No response. But I know he read it. I know because 2 days later, the blog I started got flooded with hate comments. Not from real people, burner accounts. All saying the same things he used to say to me. "Attention seeker. Maybe you deserved it. Stop acting like a victim." He was trying to erase me again. To rewrite the story where he wasn't the villain. But he didn't realize something. This time, I was the author. I screenshot every comment. I tracked the IPs. I posted them publicly, anonymized, yes, but still powerful. People saw through it. Survivors flooded the page with support, calling out the manipulation, naming the pattern. They recognized the abuse in the way he hid behind anonymous attacks, just like he once hid behind apologies. I didn't have to fight back. They did it for me. And that was the greatest victory. He wasn't just alone now. He was exposed. unmasked. Not just in my story, but in countless others who could finally recognize him for what he was. I've said before, I didn't want revenge just for me. I wanted justice for all the versions of me that ever existed. The girl who loved too blindly. The woman who stayed too long. The heart that forgave too quickly. And the soul that finally said enough. Liam taught me pain. But I taught myself power. And now? Now I use my voice the way he once used silence, like a blade. I tell my story on stages now. In rooms filled with people who carry invisible bruises. I speak not to relive the trauma, but to reclaim the truth. To remind others that being broken is not the end. Sometimes, it's the beginning. Because what he didn't understand, what men like him never understand, is that when a woman rebuilds herself from the ruins you left behind, she doesn't rise the same. She rises sharper. Some people say closure is a myth. That you don't get neat endings, just scars that stop bleeding. But I don't believe that. Not because I got an apology. Not because I got justice in the way the world defines it. But because I created my own ending, and I didn't need his permission to do it. Still, life has a strange way of circling back. I hadn't seen him in almost a year when it happened. It was a conference, ironically, on emotional resilience. I'd been invited as a speaker. Not just to talk about surviving abuse, but about rising after it. It was the kind of event he used to laugh at. Called it emotional theater. But there he was. In the back of the room, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit anymore, with eyes that darted between exits like he didn't know whether to fight or flee. He didn't expect to see me. And he definitely didn't expect to hear me speak. But I did. I stood on that stage and told my story, not with anger, not even with pain. Just truth. The way he chipped at my confidence. The way he isolated me, then told me I was lucky to have him. The way he used my love like a leash, then blamed me when it broke. I didn't use his name. I didn't need to. But I watched his face from the stage. I saw the flicker, the recognition, the slow collapse of denial in his eyes. And for the first time, I realized. He wasn't just ashamed. He was afraid. Because he couldn't rewrite this version of the story. There were too many witnesses now. Too many echoes of truth bouncing off the walls. When the session ended, he didn't approach me. He hovered by the hallway, hoping I'd walk past him. And I did. But I didn't ignore him. I stopped, looked him dead in the eye, and said 4 simple words. I outlived your damage. He flinched, just slightly, then turned his face away like a child being scolded. And I walked on, heels clicking like punctuation marks behind me. It wasn't about power anymore. It was about peace. I had built something real out of rubble. A career. A platform. A voice. Something he could never touch, never twist. That day, I realized something vital. He couldn't destroy me anymore. Because he no longer defined me. The pain he caused had become a story. And I had become the storyteller. And he? He was just a footnote. A cautionary tale. A reminder that even the worst villains eventually run out of places to hide. I went home that night and sat on my balcony, watching the city breathe beneath the stars. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't bracing for an apology that would never come. I wasn't haunted. I was free. And that freedom? It tasted nothing like revenge. It tasted like rebirth. Louder. And stronger than anything you'll ever be. After that night, I didn't see him again. Not in person, not online, not even in the subtle ways he used to haunt my world. It was like he finally understood there was no place left for him in my story. But peace. It's strange. After chaos, it feels suspicious. Like you keep waiting for a knock on the door that never comes. So for a while, I lived cautiously. Not because I feared him, but because I feared becoming him. You see, revenge is seductive. It tells you that if you just hurt them enough, you'll heal. That if you just make them pay, you'll feel whole again. But that's a lie. Because becoming the monster that broke you doesn't fix the fracture, it just spreads it. And I refuse to be anything like him. So I let go. Not of justice, not of truth, but of hatred. That was my real victory, not in ruining him, but in refusing to let him ruin me again. Still, I never forgot. I kept writing. My blog became a book. That book became a lifeline for thousands. Women, men, teens, survivors. People who'd lived through different versions of the same hell. People who finally had the words to name what was done to them. And as I toured, as I spoke on stages and in schools and shelters, I realized something powerful. He didn't just break me. He built the fire I now use to protect others. Ironic, isn't it? That his cruelty became the soil where my purpose grew. But life, in all its twisted poetry, had one more surprise for me. I got a letter. Not a message. Not an email. A real letter. Handwritten. No return address. It simply said, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know what you did. It worked. You showed me who I am. You showed others too. I lost everything, and maybe that's fair. I hope you find peace. I'm still trying to. I hope I never hurt anyone again. It wasn't signed. But I knew. The handwriting. The guilt hiding between the lines. It was him. For a moment, I felt nothing. Then, something. Not sympathy. Not closure. But release. Because I realized I didn't care anymore. Not about his apology. Not about his guilt. Not about whether he changed. That was his journey. Mine was already complete. I folded the letter, placed it in the box where I keep pieces of the past. Not because I need them, but because they remind me of who I will never be again. Then I walked out to my garden, my favorite place now. I planted a new flower. Not for him, but for her, the woman I used to be. The one who cried on cold floors. The one who begged for crumbs of love. The one who believed pain was the price of connection. She deserved a grave. And this was it. Not a grave of mourning, but of gratitude. Because she died. So, I could live. They say revenge is sweet. But what they don't tell you is that healing tastes better. Still, I won't lie to you and say I never think about him. I do. Sometimes in quiet flashes. A laugh I once loved. A lie I once believed. A night I once shattered because of him. But those memories don't hurt now. They educate. They remind me how far I've come. Who I became when I stopped trying to be lovable. And started trying to be whole. And yet, just when I thought the past was done reaching for me, it did something unexpected. It came back, but not through him. It came through her. A young woman, barely in her 20s, messaged me through my foundation's outreach line. Her email was short, shaky, full of fear disguised as questions. I think I'm dating someone like the man in your book. He tells me I'm too sensitive, that I make him act this way. He disappears for days, then comes back like nothing happened. He used to be amazing. Now I don't even recognize myself. How do you know when it's not love anymore? How do you leave someone who once saved you from your worst, but then became it? My heart clenched. Because I knew those words. I had been that girl. And now, someone else was walking through the fire I barely escaped. I replied immediately. Sent her resources. Anonymously paid for her counseling. Set her up with a support circle. But I also told her this. The moment you start asking whether it's love, it probably isn't. Real love doesn't erase you to feel powerful. Real love doesn't require you to bleed just to prove you're worthy. And as I hit send, I realized the twist I never saw coming. This was my revenge. Not the destruction of the man who broke me, but the saving of every girl he might have broken next. Because monsters like him don't always live in shadows. Sometimes they live in boardrooms, in bedrooms, in perfectly curated Instagram posts. And the only way to fight them is to shine brighter than the mask they wear. So I kept writing. I kept speaking. I kept planting flowers where my bones once ached. Until one day, I received another message from someone else, a name I didn't recognize. But the content? Chilling. I knew Liam too. He did to me what he did to you. Maybe worse. I never spoke about it. Never thought anyone would believe me. But your story, it changed everything. I left. I started over. And now, I help others leave too. I stared at the screen for a long time. Because that's when I understood. He didn't just lose me. He lost every version of me he ever created. The obedient girl. The forgiving girlfriend. The broken woman. He lost us all. And what he got in return was a legacy he never imagined. A generation of women who will never stay silent again. We don't whisper anymore. We roar. Because he held me when I was broken. Promised to stay. And used my pain to break me again. But then, I made sure he'd never heal from what I did next. Not because I ruined his life, but because I rebuilt mine. Louder. Braver. Stronger. And now, every time someone hears my story, every time a woman chooses herself over survival, he feels it. He bleeds. Slowly. Silently. Forever.